The coffee in Sarah Jenkins' favorite mug was still warm on the small kitchen table of her modest apartment. A photography book lay open. Its pages were filled with stark, black and white images of sprawling cityscapes, a world away from the quiet, tree-lined street outside her window. Before we continue, let know where you are watching from. Now, let's continue. It was September 12th, 1993. Sarah was 24 years old. She had dreams that were bigger than her small town, a passion for capturing life through a lens, and a kind smile for every customer of the diner where she worked to save money for a move to New York. She never made it. When she didn't show up for her morning shift, her manager called the police. What they found was a scene of chilling, almost sterile precision. There was no forced entry. Nothing of value was stolen. The apartment was neat, orderly, except for Sarah. The investigation was textbook. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood. They interviewed friends, family, ex-boyfriends. They chased down every possible lead until each one turned into a dead end. There were no witnesses, no fivers, no fingerprints. The killer was a ghost, but he had made one mistake. A single, microscopic error in his otherwise perfect crime. On the white linoleum of the kitchen floor, near the fallen photography book, crime scene investigators found it. A single drop of blood that did not belong to Sarah Jenkins. DNA was still a nascent technology in forensics, but they knew enough to preserve it. They created a profile of the killer, a unique genetic signature. They ran it against the nascent criminal databases. Nothing. The ghost had no name, no face. He had vanished back into the ether, leaving behind only a silent apartment and a family's shattered heart. For lead detective Frank Miller, the Sarah Jenkins case became a quiet obsession. The case file, thick with fruitless interviews and forensic dead ends, moved from his desk to a filing cabinet, and finally to the cold, dusty archives of the county's unsolved homicides. The ghost had won. 3 decades passed. The world changed in ways Detective Miller could never have imagined. The internet connected the globe. Social media created digital communities, and ordinary people, curious about their heritage, began spitting into vials and mailing their DNA to companies like Ancestry and 23andMe. They were searching for long-lost cousins for links to royalty, for clues to their family's past. They had no idea they were building a revolutionary new weapon against crime. They were one by one uploading the building blocks of a genetic dragnet that would stretch across the country and across time. In 2025, in a sterile lab hundreds of miles away, a genetic genealogist named Dr. Aris Thorne uploaded a decades-old DNA sequence into a public database called GEDmatch. The sequence was from an unsolved case file, a digital ghost from 1993. She didn't expect much. For years, this ghost had yielded nothing. She took a sip of her coffee and began to cross-reference other files. The servers hummed. Algorithms churned through millions of genetic markers. Then, a notification pinged. A match. It wasn't a direct hit. It wasn't the killer himself. It was a third cousin, a retired schoolteacher in Oregon who had uploaded her DNA a year prior to learn more about her Irish roots. For the first time in 32 years, the ghost had a connection, a tangible link to the world of the living. Aris Thorne felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment. The hunt was on. She emailed the Oregon schoolteacher, who gladly provided what she knew of her family tree. Another notification pinged. A second match. A fourth cousin, once removed. A college student in Florida. The ghost had a family, and his family held a secret they didn't even know they were keeping. Using the DNA matches as anchors, Aris and her team began to build a family tree in reverse. It was a monumental task of digital sleuthing. They dove into census records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and old newspaper clippings digitized online. They built the tree back to a common ancestor, a pair of great-great-grandparents who had lived in Ohio in the late 1800s. Then, meticulously, they began to build the tree forward again, tracing every descendant, every son, every daughter, every grandchild. The web grew, branching out across the country. Hundreds of names, hundreds of lives. But somewhere in that sprawling, complex network was a killer. The ghost was starting to take shape. They narrowed it down to one branch of the family. A set of three brothers, born between 1960 and 1968. According to public records, all three would have been in their 20s or early 30s in 1993. All three had lived within a 2-hour drive of Sarah Jenkins' apartment. One of them was the ghost. A phone rang in a quiet, suburban home. Frank Miller, now 75, with a tired face and hands that shook slightly, answered the call. He listened, his old detective's instincts firing up through the haze of retirement. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Dr. Thorne explained the process, the family tree, the final 3 candidates. They had done what he never could. They had found the ghost shadow. Now, all they needed was to prove which of the 3 brothers was their man. The final piece of the puzzle required boots-on-the-ground surveillance. Local police were tasked with discreetly collecting abandoned DNA from each of the 3 brothers. A discarded coffee cup, a used napkin, a cigarette butt. The first 2 samples came back. Not a match. There was only one brother left. The youngest one, a man who had lived a quiet, unassuming life for the past 30 years. A man who volunteered at his local church. A man who was a beloved member of his small community. A married father of 2. As Detective Miller stared at the modern-day photograph of the man emailed to him by Dr. Thorne, a photo of a smiling, respected Little League coach with kind eyes, a chilling, horrifying realization washed over him. The ghost wasn't just a monster from the past. Er was hiding in plain Sicht. His name was David Miller, in no relation to the detective who had hunted him for decades. A cruel, random twist of fate in a story full of them. On paper, David Miller was the American dream. A small business owner, a loving husband of 28 years, a father whose weekends were spent on the sidelines of soccer fields and in the pews of his local church. His photograph showed a man with laugh lines around his eyes, a man who looked like he could be anyone's friendly neighbor. For the undercover surveillance team, the contrast was sickening. They watched this pillar of the community mow his lawn. They watched him wave to the mailman. They followed him as he drove his daughter to her piano lesson. Every normal, mundane action was a mask. Every friendly smile a lie. They weren't just watching a suspect. They were watching a ghost who had mastered the art of being human. They needed his DNA. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning. David had a routine, a 7:30 a.m. stop at the Daily Grind coffee shop. He always got the same order, a large black coffee, and always threw the empty cup into the public trash can outside before getting back in his car. The detectives watched from an unmarked vehicle across the street. They saw him exit the shop, take a final sip, and toss the cup. The moment his car pulled away, an officer, dressed as a city maintenance worker, moved in. He carefully retrieved the cup with a pair of evidence tongs, sealed it in a bag, and walked away. The ghost had no idea his 32-year-old secret was now sitting in an evidence bag, on its way to a lab. Retired Detective Frank Miller waited by his phone, the hours ticking by with agonizing slowness. He hadn't slept. He just stared at the picture of David, the smiling coach, and superimposed it over the faint, horrific memories of the crime scene in Sarah Jenkins' apartment. The 2 images wouldn't connect in his mind. They were a paradox. Then the phone rang. It was Dr. Eris Thorne. Frank's hand trembled as he answered. Her voice was calm, steady, and absolutely certain. "We have a match, Frank. The DNA on the coffee cup is an identical match to the blood found at the crime scene in 1993. It's him. We have our ghost. Justice, it turns out, does not always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives on a quiet Saturday afternoon in the middle of a Little League baseball game. David Miller was standing near third base, shouting encouragement to a 10-year-old batter. Parents sat in lawn chairs, sipping sodas. The air was filled with the crack of a bat, the cheer of the crowd, the sounds of a perfect, normal life. 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective approached him slowly, deliberately, their presence a stark tear in the fabric of the idyllic scene. David saw them coming. For a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, the mask slipped. The friendly coach vanished, and behind his eyes, something cold and ancient flickered. The ghost, he didn't run, he didn't shout. He simply turned, his face a blank slate of resignation, and placed his hands behind his back before they even asked. The game went silent. Parents and children watched, confused, as the kind, funny Coach Dave was placed in handcuffs and led away from the field. His wife's cry of disbelief was the only sound that broke the stunned silence in the interrogation room. There was no dramatic confession. David Miller, the man who had hidden for over 3 decades, retreated back into the ghost. He was silent, cold, and emotionless. He offered no explanation, no remorse that he didn't have to. The science spoke for him. The drop of blood from 1993 was his accuser. The genetic family tree was his indictment. The coffee cup was his undoing during the trial. The prosecution laid out the story, not of a monster, but of a digital trail. They explained to the jury how a cousin's curiosity about her heritage, a genealogist's relentless research, and a discarded piece of trash had reached back through time to solve the impossible. David Miller sat in court, a ghost in a suit, as the family of Sarah Jenkins finally got to look their daughter's killer in the eye. The guilty verdict was a formality. Justice had already been delivered by the ones and zeros of a database that a week after the sentencing, Frank Miller, a man now truly at peace, drove to the cemetery. He stood before the simple, elegant headstone that read, Sarah Jenkins, beloved daughter. Chasing the light, that he placed a single white rose on the grass, that he thought about the decades of silence, the years of gnawing uncertainty. He thought about the families of countless other victims, still waiting for their ghosts to get a name. And he realized the most powerful lesson of all, that in our modern world, we leave pieces of ourselves everywhere. A digital footprint in the sand of the internet, a biological echo in a strand of hair, a flake of skin, or a database built by relatives we've never even met. Secrets have an expiration date. The past is never truly in the past. It's just waiting for the right person or the right technology to turn on the light. And for every ghost who thinks they have vanished without a trace, there is a family tree patiently waiting in the dark, ready to tell its story. The technology that solved this case is evolving every day. What are your thoughts on using public DNA databases to catch criminals? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most compelling cold cases.